Next. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm super duper nervous. I'm just going to put it out there. And so if I sound like I'm reading, it's because I totally am. I'm going to try not to, but you never know. So first of all, I just wanted to say how nervous and excited and grateful I am to be here. Humbled, you might even say. See what I did there? And actually, to be perfectly honest, when Creative Mornings Vancouver asked me to come and do this, I was so excited and thrilled, and I just said yes right away. And they were like, great. So your topic is humility. I was like, oh, crap. And they're like, yeah, just get up there for 20 minutes, talk about yourself, and also talk about being humble. How do you do that? And so I told a bunch of my friends that, I got to do this, and I was feeling a bit deer in headlights about it. And they all said, no, you're the perfect person for this. You're so humble. And I thought, what do you say? Do you say, thank you? Like, yes, I know. I really am so very humble. And, doesn't that basically take away the whole humble thing and just kind of make me a bit of an asshole? So instead, I just blushed and kind of waved my hands around like this. Like, now. So it's interesting to hear Mark's definition of it because... Did I go away? For me, humility is a totally different thing. And I think when my friends say, oh, you're so humble, I'm actually working on a theory what their perception of me being humble is actually just a raging case of self-doubt. I think that's what my humble is. And so, you start thinking about this, like, oh my God, I got to talk to these people about humility. And so then I started getting really confused about what the definition was. And what does being humble mean? Because I talked to a few friends and they all had their own take. And so, of course, dictionary.com. That's the first place you need to go. And I thought it would help clear things up. It did not, because there were two completely different meanings for humble. So the first one, not arrogant, modest, to be humble although successful. And I thought, oh, that's nice. I like that. And then right below that, having a feeling of insignificance and or inferiority. And there we go. A raging case of self-doubt. So now at this point, I had typed the word humble quite a bit into dictionary.com. And so I sort of started thinking about humble pie, which naturally made me start thinking about actual pie. And voila, a chocolate-filled idea popped into my head. So I started thinking about there's two different definitions of humble, and there's kind of two parts of a pie. There's the sweet, delicious, confident filling, modest, humble, although successful, and the soggy, unsure crust at the bottom of the pan, a feeling of insignificance or inferiority. So you'd think that a person would either feel one way or the other. But strangely, I happen to know both parts of this pie incredibly well. So I am going to tell you my story about my journeys, as an artist, and then how Jealous Curator came about, and then all of the things that I've sort of learned in the last few years since I've written the book and been doing a lot of talking and meeting people. It's not really about me talking, it's about talking to the people after and hearing gathering all of these Me Too stories. So I'm going to share sort of my revelations from that. I don't trust the technology. I kept seeing if it's up there. That's me when I was in the Brownies. I was totally the art kid growing up, and probably due to the fact that my mom is an artist. My mom's here. There she is. And apparently, according to her, I was stealing her supplies since I could reach her table. Also, probably thanks to a very crafty brownie leader that I had. I was always making crafts. I made all of my friends' birthday gifts, even though I'm sure they would have preferred store-bought gifts. In high school, I was the head of our yearbook. I designed the big banner for when we graduated. I was just the art kid, and I had complete confidence in it. And not in a braggy, conceited way. It was just a fact. You know, I just loved making art. And so I was very, very confident, yet humble. I guess, you know, thinking about it, there must have been a tiny bit of insecurity in there, though, because when it came time to go to university, I applied for marine biology. My dad is a scientist, and so I was good at both, and it just seemed like a much more responsible route to take than art. So I went into marine biology. And, you know, I did well, but I was kind of still the art kid, because when I didn't feel like doing homework, I would draw and paint and, you know, not do biology homework. And so my dad sort of said to me near the end of my first year, you know, I really think you should my PhD dad said, I think you should switch into fine art. It's just who you are. And I said, well, what about things like food and rent? And he very wisely said, do what you love, and the money will come, and if it doesn't, you won't care because you'll be happy. So I switched. The art kid was doing her BFA. I was so excited, not nervous at all. I was still swimming around in the chocolate goo, feeling totally confident in what I was going to bring. But that did not last very long. I did not fit in at art school. The art kid did not fit in art school. You know, like that was a little bit disconcerting. So for 3 years, I sort of struggled my way through classes and critiques, and I mean, ultimately I developed a very thick skin, which in hindsight is a really great thing. I got quite good at defending myself. But slowly over that time, I was sort of sinking like quicksand from the nice gooey chocolate, slowly towards the crust. And I didn't really hit bottom until about 6 weeks before I graduated. And I apologize if anybody's heard this story, but it is a key story. And I bet now I've realized that I am not the only one that has this story. Probably half of you in this room had this story too. But so 6 weeks before I graduated, in my painting class, I was a painting major, I was a critique. How many people have been in a critique? Yes. So I hung up my 5 pieces that were to be my grad show and braced myself to be slammed, because that's how it normally went. And my prof, who hated me, loved it. Loved everything. He went on and on and on. I'd found this new niche, and he'd never seen anything like this. And I was like, oh my God, you know, I've got this thing figured out 6 weeks to go till grad. And so the following week, we were having a visiting artist come from New York, and 3 people could show their work. Everyone was terrified to show their work, but I was just like, well, I'll do it, you know, and so I was the first to go. I put up the same 5 pieces that I'd shown the week before. It was meant to be a 10-minute crit. It was 30 minutes, and they tore me apart, including the prof, who had told me that he loved it. And normally I could defend myself because I was so used to this. I had 3 years of it. I was very used to it. But I think I was so blindsided by him loving it the week before that I just sat there kind of like a deer in headlights, and I could feel myself starting to blotch and like holding the tears back, and I thought, oh my God, it's going to be even more humiliating if I cry. So I just did nothing. I just sat there and took it. And at about the 23-minute mark into the 30 minutes, my painting prof said to me, a painting major, 5 weeks before I graduated, yep. So that was the crust. So I know, right? Anywho, so for the next year or so after graduation, I tried to keep making art, but all I could hear was, you should never paint again. And every stroke, I second-guessed everything. And slowly, you know, this is an aha moment I've had recently, is that slowly, over time, that voice of my prof morphed its way into being the voice of my inner critic. And, I'd never had an inner critic before. I had always been very confident about my art. I had the encouragement from my family. I had encouragement from my friends in high school, everything. But now I had an inner critic, a really, really mean one. And I think that's when my version of humble quickly turned into something a little closer to humiliation. I continued to make art, but unlike my former art kid self, I didn't show anybody what I was doing, to which my friends said, "Oh, you're so humble," which is exactly when I think I started to define humility as a raging case of self-doubt. So instead of continuing down this super shitty road, I switched and went into design. And it was just, I fit in beautifully. I found my people. I was the top of my class. I graduated and got a job right away. I became a creative director. I won awards and very, very successfully completely ignored fine art for about a good solid decade. And as a designer, I was right back in the chocolate goo, and it just felt so good. I didn't want to be anywhere near that crust, and so I just sort of rolled around in the chocolate for a while. In 2006, my son was born, and I decided, isn't he cute? He's 8.5 now, and he didn't want to come see me. Do you want to come watch me talk? Well, do I have to? No, you don't. So around the 2-year mark being home with him, I was plotting the death of Dora the Explorer and desperately looking for a creative outlet for myself. And I thought, maybe now is the time to get back into art. So I always say, not only had Charlie been born, but so had the internet. And so I started Googling around and found thousands and thousands of artists that I really loved. And not in a good way. I just felt very overwhelmed. It just seemed like everything had been done in every color, better than I could do it. What was the point? Oh, it was a spiral downward. And I've said this a lot. I always had this 50-50 reaction where I'd find work that I loved, and I'd be so inspired, and I'd run out and buy canvases so I could be the next great painter. And then, shortly after, I'd just be like, oh, what's the point? And so I just never made anything. I have so many canvases. Perfect, clean canvases in my studio that I've never touched because I was afraid to ruin them. So I was just basically overwhelmed, super jealous, and broken. And there I was, right back down in the crust where I'd been all those years before, possibly even underneath the pan. So I wallowed around down there for about 6 months until I could no longer take it. My bookmarks list was, I can't even tell you, that long. And my husband, Greg, who happens to be a digital strategist, said, I think you should start a blog. And he said, there was no intent for a community or anything. He said, you're such a visual person. Turn this bookmarks list into something visual so that you can kind of figure out what it is you like. And he also wisely pointed out that he said, this jealousy is eating you alive. It's toxic. And he said, if you keep it inside, it's poison. But he said, if you can say it out loud in a positive way, you can turn it magically into admiration. And so that is what I did, and the Jealous Curator was born. So Mark explained it quickly. I just, for 6 years now, I write one post every day about an artist that I love, why I love them, and a link back to their site. And my only criteria, basically, is if their art makes me think, damn, I wish I thought of that, then I know I have tomorrow's post. And I still use that sort of gut instinct all these years later. And so from the very beginning, I felt really, really confident about Jealous Curator. And writing this talk, I was like, I wonder why that is. Because I've been very humble about it, and in the good way, and really confident. And I think it's probably because it's not really about me. It's about the artists that I feature. It's about their work. If it weren't for them, this site wouldn't exist. So I'm able to sort of remove myself from it. And as it's grown and had success, I just feel very overwhelmed and blessed and kind of stunned by everything that's happened. Humbled, you might say. See, I did it again. So about 3 years in, I was offered a book deal by Chronicle in San Francisco, which I could not even believe. And then a second book deal while I was working on the first book deal. And then in November, I just signed a third one. which again, like I can't even, every now and then my husband's like, isn't it weird that you're, and I'm like, I know. Sometimes we share an office and sometimes I'll say to him, if he'll be quietly, silently working, and I'll be like, could you just, I'm an author and I'm just emailing my editor and then I've got a call with my publicist, so I'm just gonna need you to just take it down a level. I'm sure he thinks it's hilarious. I do. It's just because it's just so weird. You're like, how is this my life? One day last summer, was working away at my computer and I got a little ping from O Magazine. And when you get your little email alert, and I thought, well, that's weird. I don't subscribe to O Magazine. So I just kept working, and then I just glanced up to read the first line, and it said, "Hi, Danielle, I'm the senior editor at O Magazine." And I was like, holy shit! And came out to tell my husband. I think he thought someone died, because I came out like this. And he's like, oh my God, what happened? And he's like, did someone die? And I'm like, no, but I might, because Oprah just emailed me. And, well, Oprah's people. And so they ended up writing a piece in the magazine, and then after I talked to them about that, they said, well, it's all so interesting. Would you like to fly to LA and do a bunch of segments for OWN show? I didn't meet Oprah. So I went down and did that, and then around the same time, Pixar called and said, would you like to come and speak to our creatives about being creative? I was like, okay. So I did, and it was amazing, and it's all been very humbling, because you just kind of can't believe that it's happening. So I've been running around, North America doing speaking gigs and TV appearances, telling people to be confident about being creative and share your stuff and own it. And was I taking my own advice? No. So I was one person experiencing both sides of the pie at exactly the same time. As JAWS curator, totally confident, like it's really weird. It's very split personality. I feel really great. And then if anybody says, oh, and I hear you do work, I'm like, oh, sorry, I don't know. So like, what a hypocrite. Too bad my topic wasn't like hypocrisy. Then I'd be like, I would have been set. So here I was working so hard to help other people, but completely ignoring my own blocks and inner critic and issues and all that junk. But I love how I feel as JAWS curator. I love that, confidence, and I want so badly to feel like that as an artist. Me and my art had been down in that crust for a good solid 20 years at this point, and I was literally sick of it. So, blocked. The first book is called Creative Block. So the whole idea, I interviewed 50 artists from around the world, and because I figured they're full-time working artists. They can't be blocked, like they've got deadlines and things to do, but they're human beings, so they must get blocked. So I'm like, I'm gonna ask them what they do. And so that's what Creative Block is. It's 50 interviews from people all around the world, photographers, painters, ceramics, everybody, saying, how do you get out of blocks? How do you deal with negative criticism? Do you hear your inner critic? And it was amazing what they came back with. And so, sort of what you realize is that whether you're a painter, photographer, designer, musician, actor, writer, anything, when you're in the middle of a creative block, humility is pretty much front and center. There are no ideas coming, and in that moment you are pretty darn sure that no new idea will ever come. Having a feeling of insignificance or inferiority? Oh, hell yes. So back in my pre-JAWS curator days, I used to think that there was no way out of a block, that if you were in a block, especially one that lasted a while, it probably meant that you should just quit. You should never paint again. But thankfully, I have learned that there are lots and lots of ways out. And the very interesting thing is, as you do the things that you need to do to push yourself out of that block, you actually start doing work that you like and are proud of. It's a quite a process, and so begins the journey from the soggy crust up into the chocolate goo. So in the book, I also asked the artists after I interviewed them to give an unblocking project. Just a really quick little jump start thing that, kind of shakes you out of a rut and gets you moving, and what they use. So there I was running around telling other people how to get unstuck while not making art of my own, and I had these 50 projects in the book. Had I done any of them? No, I had not. Too busy telling other people to do them. So at the beginning of 2015, just in January, I was like, right, there's 50 in the book. I was like, I'm going to do one a week. I'm like, oh, who the hell am I kidding? I'm not going to do one a week. So I was like, I'll do one a month. And just the first Saturday of every month, I'm going to start a new one. And then I also kind of knew that I wouldn't do it. So I put it out to my readers, and I said, okay, you guys, I'm going to do this. Do it with me, too. And I'll post it, and then, we can all do it together. And the wonderful thing that makes me do is, A, it makes me do it. Because I would look like such a jerk if I didn't. Like if they're all out there doing it and I'm not doing it. So it kind of keeps me accountable. And it also forces me to share what I'm doing. I'm really bad about, I can tell you about every artist in the world, but I do not want to post my stuff at all, which is so dumb. So this is actually really forcing me to, I Instagram what I made and I put it out on Twitter because everybody else is too. And we all hashtag it CreativeUnblock so that we can see what everybody else is doing. And April's goes up tomorrow. So if anybody wants to do it with us, it's just on my site. I'm going to post it. And so many people are doing it now, and it's so much fun, and it's actually working, which is great. So there seems to be sort of 3 themes that I've seen emerge in all of the, the interviews and all of the unblocking projects. And so these are the 3 of them, and then I'm going to give you some of the unblocking projects that go with each. So the first one, screw perfection. So many people get hung up on, if you're going to make something, it has to be perfect. No, it doesn't. And actually, in playing around, I've realized that the things that are imperfect are actually much more interesting to look at than the things that are perfect. So there's a project by Trey Spiegel. He's a New York painter, and it's so fun. The whole idea around his project is you cannot ruin this. So what you're supposed to do is either draw something or find a found image, photocopy it 50 times or enough times that you aren't going to feel like you're wrecking something. And then in one sitting, alter that image 50 different ways. Cut it up, put paint on it, draw on it, fold it up, do whatever you want, and not to be precious about it. You don't have one. It's like, oh man, I've got this one perfect piece of paper. I better not mess it up. No, you have 50. Just go. And so I did it because, hypocrite days are over. And I found an image that I procrastinated. Found an image that I really loved. Copy, it took me forever, got them, and then I got all my supplies, and it was really overwhelming. I just had too many supplies. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to only use neon pink supplies. So I only pulled out my neon pink, because then it kind of gave me like a little corral to play in. And the first few I was like so precious about, and then I was like, I've got a stack. I was like, who cares? So, you just start going. And by the end, out of the 50, I had probably, I'd say 25 that I like. Which is 25 pieces of work that I like. That's crazy. I don't think I've done 25 pieces of work that I like in like 20 years. So, and it's just a very freeing project. And so that was our January project, and people loved it. So I highly recommend trying that. The next sort of theme, go outside. Sitting in your studio or office staring at a screen or a piece of paper doesn't always make ideas come. So weird, right? Go outside. Fresh air and new experiences do wonders. And so there's this one exercise, her name's Mel Robson. She's a ceramics artist from a tiny little town in Australia. I love this one, and I haven't done it yet. It's going to be the May project because I wanted it to be warm all over the world so that everybody could do it. But and it was so cold in New York, my poor New York friends wouldn't have been able to do it. So you roll 2 dice, and if it's a 2 and a 4, it's 24 minutes, 3 and a 2, 32 minutes, and you get on any mode of transportation you want, roller skates, a bike, a bus, a car, you could walk, for that amount of time. Wherever you get after 32 minutes, as long as it's safe, I head in a good direction, stay there for 1 hour and do whatever you want in that 1 hour. So write down the things that you see. Maybe you gather things off the ground like pebbles or things that you can turn into a sculpture later. Maybe you write down things that you overhear people saying. Maybe you bring a camera and you photograph things. It's basically to get you out of your environment into somewhere that you would never normally be, and then make you incredibly present when you are in that space. so fun. I cannot wait to do this one. And if anybody has kids, I think it would be an awesome thing to do with kids too, on very boring summer vacations when they're looking for stuff to do. Get on a bike and ride for 24 minutes. So there's actually quite a few that fall under the go outside. And then the final one, make rules and then play within them. So that's sort of like the neon pink thing. So many of these professional artists, that's what they say. They don't start with a blank canvas that they stare at. It's very much like, okay, they either use a piece of paper that already has something on it and then work around that. Because blank pages are scary. They're really, really intimidating. And so if you can give yourself a jumping off point, it makes it a lot easier. So one of them is by an artist, a painter named Kate Pugsley, and it's a very Matisse kind of thing to do. She just picks all of her favorite colors from her paint box and just paints paper, sheets of paper in that one particular color, lets them dry, and then she just cuts them into random shapes. You can cut them into random shapes or recognizable shapes, whatever you like, but just go for it. Cut a whole bunch. And then she makes collages from them. And they just spark. I actually find it works better if you do random objects, because then you're not trying to do something perfect. It's just like squares and rectangles and circles, and then you use those to compose a new thing. And I started doing it just for this. My whole body, all of my work has completely changed. And now I'm doing this. And I never would have done it if I hadn't done this quick little jumping off point. So those are sort of 3 that have really stood out for me, but there's 47 more in the book. But those are sort of the main themes that seem to emerge. Now these jump starters do wonders to get you out of a block. But I also really feel like every creative person should sort of have that recipe for the chocolate goo in their back pocket. So this is my version of this recipe. First thing is a scoop of achievable goals. Set reasonable, achievable goals so that you have a real chance of doing it, and then therefore being proud of yourself. If your goal is to write, the next War and Peace by Friday, or, have your first solo show at MoMA, you might be setting yourself up for a bit of disappointment. So, maybe the goal should be a little more realistic, like do something creative every day. Whether that's you paint a little bit, you write a little bit, you ice a cake, you work in your garden, whatever it is, just so that creativity becomes a normal part of your life and not this thing that you put on the back burner. Another goal could be share your work with another human being, which leads right into the next ingredient, which is a big dollop of vulnerability. You cannot create in a vacuum. So share what you're doing with trusted sources. And when I say trusted sources, I don't really mean Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And, I think a lot of people feel like, oh, geez, I guess I'm supposed to Instagram this and tweet it out to the world, and, it's supposed to be on all these places. It doesn't need to be. If you're not ready for unsolicited advice from internet trolls, don't do that. Find trusted sources that are going to give you feedback that might not always be exactly what you want to hear, but that when they say it, they mean it, and you trust them, so it's totally valuable. Creating your own tribe is hugely important. I kind of created mine by accident with Gels Curator. I thought I was alone for decades. And then I started Gels Curator just for myself, and you realize suddenly there's thousands and thousands of people that are putting up their hand and saying, me too. And so I have this huge community around me now that makes me confident and, encourages me to try new things. So, that might mean that you start a bad art night with friends, where you just get together and have pizza and wine and make the worst thing that you can make. If anybody was at Kim Worker's talk about failure, that's her advice. Just make the ugliest thing that you can make. And also, there's wine and pizza there. So that's good. Everyone has insecurities, even professionals, and there's no shame in admitting it. And in fact, there's actually a huge amount of power in being vulnerable, and it will probably lead you to experiences and learning that you could not have even predicted. And the final ingredient, a truckload of thank yous, even if you have to say it through clenched teeth. So when someone says your work is great, take a deep breath and smile and say thank you, instead of giving them a giant list of reasons why they're wrong. The more you practice doing this, the easier it becomes, and it's actually an incredibly great way to trick your inner critic into thinking that maybe he shouldn't slam you quite so often. And finally, when someone says, oh, you're so humble, don't blush, and wave your hands around like this. Just take a deep breath, smile, and say thank you. Thank you.
Okay, who has a question? Let's get started. Oh, come on, way up here. No. We want to know who you are.
Got it. Thanks so much for your talk. Have you ever told that painting instructor that story?
No, but I might dedicate my next book to him.
I love it. Fantastic.
Because without him, there would be no book deals. Yeah.
My name is Joelle, and I actually have a question for the whole audience. I would love to see people raise their hands if you had the equivalent of that asshole painting teacher in your life. How many of you had that?
That's a good question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Cool.
That's so crazy because I really, for the last 20 years, I really thought I was the only one that ever happened to. Just so crazy. But then, you talk to all these people and Me Too stories, me too, me too, me too, me too. And why do they do that?
Have you seen the movie Whiplash?
No, I've been told maybe that I shouldn't see it, that it's a little
Holy.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm just wondering if you have sort of given any thought to the sort of boundary between curation and criticism.
Yes, that's a really good question. There definitely is one. I get criticized because I'm not a critical art writer. I write nice things, and apparently that makes me not a real art person.
How does that make you feel?
Humbled? Yeah. And I think, I do say my criticism comes through my curation in a way. Like, I don't write about people unless I think, oh man, I wish I'd made that. So there is criticism in that I don't write about them if it's not right. But I would never ever, like, it's wonderful but brutal in that I get probably 50 submissions a day. And like, the people are so nice. And they write me these really beautiful emails, I've been following you for all these years, and it would mean the world if you wrote about me on your blog, and you're like, oh, please be good, please be good, please be good. And if it might be good, but it's just not my taste or whatever, and so I don't write about them. And it's heartbreaking. So, I'm sure they see it as criticism and feel rejected by me, and I hate that I would ever make anybody feel like that. So it's a tightrope that I really don't like walking. Does that answer your question? Kind of? That's just my old, yeah.
So I had a quick question. I work in advertising, so there are days where I just want to bang my head against the wall and kill myself.
I did that for years and years, yes.
But when you're feeling vulnerable and you look at someone else's work, has it ever inspired you, given you an aha moment where it made your work even better than you thought it could be in general?
By looking at their work?
Yeah, because you feel vulnerable with their work, and it's kind of there's this aha moment where you're like, oh my god, and then you go and create something that's even better than you thought it was, whether it's your Creative Unblock stuff or just other things you do in general, artistic-wise. Yeah,
I find, again, that's a fine line to walk, because you're like, well, I don't want to copy, but how do I let this inform? And Jell's Curator's actually been really great for that, because I see thousands and thousands of artists over, a pretty short period of time. So I do kind of glean the things, but it's usually more like technique, or when I first started, I just copied everybody. And, it was meant as a form of flattery, but I'm sure it just looked like a direct ripoff. So I do try and not do that, while taking as much inspiration as I can from, the things that I'm seeing that people are doing and cool techniques that I've never seen before, and try and apply it to my own way of art making.
Cool, thank you.
Good morning. So I have a question for you about how you view your artistic practice different from your curatorial practice. Because you talked a lot about, and even with the diagram of the pie, where you saw your fine art practices as kind of sitting on the bottom, and then the jealous curator sitting in the middle. But I think that curation is a type of art practice. And so I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Okay, ready? This is the super vulnerable, telling you guys everything thing. Okay. I think I have exquisite taste in art. I am really proud of Jealous Curator. I think I pick really great things, and I feel like my curation skills are here. I feel like the art that I make is like here. And I've always kept Jealous Curator and Danielle Krysa very, very separate. Like, you know, I haven't even really said my name on my site because I was so worried in the beginning that people would Google me, Google Danielle Krysa, find my art and be like, oh, you know, like, Jealous Curator is so good, and what is this, you know? And so 2 things on that. One, that happened. So about a year and a half, 2 years, I'd done a couple of speaking gigs, so now people were starting to know my actual name. So, you know, I was Googling myself at 2 in the morning, as you do, and I find this article that this girl, this blog had written about my work, and I was like, oh, and she said, you know, I've just recently found this series of collages. What? Oh. My back? It's like Fonzie. And so, and it said, I've just, you know, this is this artwork. It's by, you know, the Jealous Curator, who has an exquisite site, blah, blah, blah. And you would think, given her amazing taste, that her own artwork would not be so trite and yada, yada, and yada, yada, and you should never paint again. And like, I just started crying. You know, it's just like, my worst nightmare has come true. And so that just reinforced that that was something I should worry about. So I have always just kept them very, very separate. And then, but it's funny now, I'm forcing myself to work now, and I'm trying to take my own advice, and it's so funny, because it's this split personality thing. When I make a piece of art, anything, I'll look at it and think, would the Jealous Curator write about this? And if the Jealous Curator wouldn't write about it, I keep going. And if I think, hell yeah, she'd write about that, I stop. Isn't that weird and kind of narcissistic? But anyway, I'm so split on those two. They just feel like very separate worlds to me. And you're right, curation is very creative, and I love it. And like, I'm still a graphic designer by day. If I could figure out how to make Jealous Curator my full-time thing, I would, because I love it. It's the most fulfilling thing, you know, besides being Charlie's mom, that I've ever done. But yeah, I gotta get the artwork out of the crust and kind of scooch it up a little bit. And the interesting thing is, I've been curating a lot of shows, and in the last year, 3 shows that I've curated, the gallery has said, great, and we want some of your work in it too. And I'm like, oh, no. No, that's okay. And they force me, and it's been really good, you know, to like actually watch people react to it. And you're like, okay, this isn't as horrifying as I thought. You know, it actually sold some. So it's been very cathartic for me, this sort of journey of like trying to scooch the art up to where the curation is. That was a really long answer, sorry.
2 questions to go. Well, I'm going to go here.
Thank you. This is my first time here. It is a Good Friday. I wanted to know if you allow comments on your blog, and if so, how do you deal with the unsolicited internet trolls?
Yes, I do allow comments. I have been really lucky. My community is the nicest, most supportive group of people ever. And so generally it is only really amazing comments. As I've gotten bigger in the last year or so, the nasty stuff has started to come in. And my husband, he's a social media strategist guy, so he's like, delete it. If it's really bad, he's like, delete it. I'm like, no. This is the mother in me. I am going to use this as an example. And I basically scold them and say, oh, not in my house. And as a message to everyone else because a lot of really big blogs, nobody's really on those channels moderating. They'll post their stuff and then they're out for the day. I am on there all the time. And so if something nasty comes in, I am on it. And that ain't gonna happen. And then people are like, oh, geez. And then people will jump in and defend. And very often the person that said something mean is like, oh, sorry, I hadn't had coffee yet. And and I think because I've done that and been right on them, I really have managed to kind of avoid a lot of that, which I feel really blessed about.
Who's got the best question in the house? Nope. Grandparents and trees. You're confident? Feeling good?
I'm just wondering, have you ever met people who are not humble and how you deal with them?
Yes. I worked in advertising for 15 years. I kind of try and avoid them, I guess. Again, you know, in the art world, I've been really lucky to actually meet really talented artists who are humble. And I think because, I won't even go near the advertising world. Let's just avoid that. But in art, actually, most people I've met are really humble, which is funny because when I went to art school, everybody hated me, and so I therefore hated them. And I decided in my mind, I'm sorry to all of you artists, I decided that all artists were awful. They were mean, they wore black boots and dark makeup, and I hated them. And so when I had Charlie and I decided that this was gonna, you know, I was gonna change everything, I did the artist way. And everybody knows the artist way. I did the artist way and forced myself on those artist dates. And it was like, I did scary things like go to a gallery. Yes, terrifying. And I started meeting all of these artists and expected them to be not humble and awful and conceited and jerks. They were so nice. And I was like, oh my God, they're just people like me. And it sort of started this whole, like, you know, I'd shut myself off from that for 15 years and to realize that really talented, amazing people can also be humble too. And very often have very loud inner critics. So it's been a real eye-opener, actually. Mm-hmm.